Have you ever mistaken dysfunction for love? It's a haunting question, and one Carl Jung would urge you to sit with, not run from. Because what we tolerate in the name of love often says more about our unconscious wounds than our conscious choices. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That means the people we attract, the patterns we repeat, the pain we endure, it's not all by chance. Sometimes it's the familiar ache of what we've never questioned. We confuse control with care. We accept silence as safety. We let the unacceptable slide because we've normalized it. But the real danger, we stop hearing our own inner voice. We doubt our instincts. And we begin to believe that suffering is just part of connection. This isn't about blame, it's about awakening, about looking honestly at the emotional contracts we never signed out loud but still feel bound by. Pain doesn't always come from what others do to us, it often comes from what we allow, again and again, hoping it will one day feel like love. Jung's work wasn't just about analysis, it was about liberation. He believed that reclaiming your soul begins by facing what you've silenced within yourself, and it starts with one uncomfortable, empowering realization. Not everything you've learned to tolerate is love. If this resonates, it's time to get honest, because awareness is the first rebellion against unconscious pain. But before we begin with the first behavior, Jung would never want you to normalize. Subscribe, like and comment below. They say it's love. They say they care. But somehow you feel smaller, more confused, and less yourself every time you're around them. Emotional manipulation doesn't always scream, it whispers. It wears the mask of concern. It sounds like, "I just worry about you," when what they mean is, "I don't trust you to make your own decisions." It looks like guilt-tripping you for setting boundaries or shaming you when you finally speak up. This is what Jung warned us about. When we deny the truth of our own soul, we invite suffering into our lives disguised as connection. When someone constantly questions your choices, undermines your feelings, or makes you feel guilty for prioritizing your needs, it's not love. It's control camouflaged as care. And the most dangerous part? It's subtle. It trains you to second-guess yourself. Over time, you start to feel guilty for saying no. You wonder if you're being too sensitive. You begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, their comfort is more important than your truth. But Jung's insight is clear. What we repress, deny, or tolerate unconsciously will grow in power and manifest as internal conflict. Emotional manipulation makes you a stranger to your own instincts. It severs the link between your feelings and your reality. You feel the ache but can't name it. You sense something is wrong, but you don't feel entitled to say so. And this is how it works. It doesn't destroy you overnight. It erodes you quietly, replacing your self-trust with confusion and your self-worth with self-doubt. Don't ignore that tension in your chest. Don't silence the voice that says, "This isn't right." Because that voice is the last part of you that still remembers what real love feels like, safe, clear, empowering. The question isn't whether they love you. The question is, does this love honor your soul, or does it ask you to abandon it? I'm just being honest. You've heard it before, words laced with sharp edges delivered with a shrug as if cruelty were a form of virtue. But Carl Jung would call this what it truly is, masked contempt. Not clarity, real honesty nurtures. It's vulnerable, connective, and rooted in care. But when someone uses truth as a weapon, they're not being honest. they're being hurtful. And over time, that kind of disguised cruelty doesn't just sting, it shrinks you. You start to wonder if your reactions are overblown, if your pain is unreasonable. You begin to accept criticism that wounds, not helps. This is the slow erosion Jung warned us about. The soul learns to bend, then break, under the weight of repeated contempt. The mind gets foggy, your confidence falters, conversations turn into landmines, and you find yourself apologizing just to keep the peace. Then there's control, another shape it takes, but not loud authoritarian control. The soft kind, the convincing kind, the kind that says, "I'm only doing this to protect you." While limiting your freedom, choices, or independence, you may hear, "I just want what's best for you." But somehow you feel caged, not cared for. Jung understood that when people project their fears onto you, under the guise of love, they're not keeping you safe, they're keeping you small. What looks like concern is often fear of your autonomy, your growth, your truth. And if you've been conditioned to associate love with control, you'll mistake being monitored for being loved. But love isn't possession, and protection isn't power over. Real care supports your wings, it doesn't clip them. If someone calls you too sensitive when you flinch at cruelty, or too reckless when you long for independence, remember this: sensitivity is wisdom, and longing is direction. Don't let someone else's fear define your boundaries. Don't let cruelty wear the mask of truth. And don't let control be the price you pay for being loved. Because the soul doesn't thrive in cages, no matter how gently they're built. You start to question your memory. You doubt your emotions. You wonder if maybe you are the problem. That's how gaslighting begins. It's not just lying, it's erasing your reality. You express hurt, and they tell you it never happened. You recall a moment clearly, and they insist you imagined it. You try to explain how you feel, and they say, "You're being dramatic," or "You're too sensitive." Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But gaslighting doesn't lead to understanding. It leads to self-destruction. Because it doesn't irritate, it unravels. It takes your intuition, your truth, your clarity, and turns them into fog. Over time, you stop trusting your own experiences. You become dependent on the person who's rewriting your reality. You seek their approval just to feel anchored, because your own emotional compass no longer points north. That confusion, that emotional fog, it's not accidental, it's the design. And then there's invalidation. It sounds like, "You're overreacting." Or, "Why do you always make everything about you?" Or the cold, emotionless shrug when you open your heart and get silence in return. Invalidation doesn't argue, it erases. It tells you your feelings are too much, too messy, too inconvenient to matter. What Jung knew, and what many forget, is that your inner world is your foundation. And when it's constantly dismissed or ridiculed, you begin to silence it yourself. You pre-edit your emotions. You censor your truth. You tell yourself to stop feeling before anyone else even speaks. This is how people lose themselves, not all at once, but piece by piece. If you feel confused in conversations that should bring clarity, if you feel smaller after trying to connect, if your truth keeps getting rewritten, pay attention. You're not weak, you're being manipulated, and you deserve to stand firmly in your reality, to speak your truth without being gaslit, to feel your feelings without being told they're wrong. Because the moment you begin to trust your inner world again is the moment you reclaim your power. They don't ask how you feel. They miss your pain, dismiss your emotions. That's not distance, it's a lack of empathy. Over time, it creates a quiet loneliness, even when they're right beside you. Then the betrayals pile up. Small promises broken again and again until trust fades. You stop expecting consistency, you start expecting disappointment. And when they call disconnection independence, it becomes a shield. Not strength, but fear of closeness, of responsibility, of being seen. Jung warned us true connection requires presence. Without it, love turns hollow. You can't build intimacy with someone who chooses distance over depth. Sarcasm sounds like a joke, but it lands like a cut. It's humor with a hidden blade, used not to connect, but to control. Over time, the constant jabs make you flinch before you speak, laugh to cover hurt, and question if you're too sensitive. Then comes the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the punishing kind. Emotional withdrawal, when they shut down, shut you out, and leave you guessing what you did wrong. It's control through absence. You feel alone, not just in the room, but in the relationship. Carl Jung knew that what we don't confront becomes our prison. These behaviors aren't just toxic, they're soul wounds, and healing begins the moment you decide, this is no longer mine to carry.